BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, time for the AMA. Welcome to the show. This is the Ask Me Anything where I respond to your questions and comments, and we have a discussion. Michael Morford may have solved the Zodiac Killer mystery, and we will be devoting a large portion of this episode to looking at Morf's new suspect, even though his legal name has not been made public, or at least not in the sources that I've been going through. But I would like to just get to two quick comments about last Wednesday's episode, the Zodiac Killer CIA connection. The first one comes to us from the Cat Meow, who says, Zodiac and Alan Dulles did a project called Project Paperclip together when the United States of America stole 1,600 German scientists. Dulles has a lot to do with why the Zodiac was the way he was. A lot of Zodiac's claims, such as killing 37-plus people, come from the German concentration camps. Dulles was also being the head of CIA as well as MK later on. The Dulles brothers were evil with a capital E. When I did the episode Zodiac Killer CIA Connection, I mostly zoned in on the possibility of the CIA was involved with the Zodiac crimes. In short, I read off a message that had been written by Playtime, sharing a theory that the first two crimes that occurred in the Zodiac chronology, Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs, were drug-related or gang-related shootings, maybe both even. And then Lake Berryessa and the Paul Stein murder were committed by a CIA operative. It was part of Operation Mockingbird to manipulate the media coverage, and a series of events happened after that. So it's a multiple killers theory, and it's quite similar to the Zodiac hoax theory, but it goes a little bit further and says that the crimes were actually committed by a CIA operative. The first two incidents would be more of what is described as the Zodiac hoax theory. Someone was writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit, and then the second two incidents were actually committed by the CIA. This comment here from the Cat Meow says something in a different way, and that is how the Zodiac Killer, if I recall from her theory, is that he was a CIA operative. We call him Robert Kimball on this channel. That's not his real name, that's an alias. But her suspect was a CIA operative as well as a merchant marine, and he went rogue. Like, this wasn't an organized CIA operation. I believe she accuses him of committing Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and the Paul Stein murder, but she accuses his half-brother of committing the Lake Berryessa stabbing. This is quite different than, it is a CIA connection, it's just someone lost control and went after David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, or at the very least, it was a case of mistaken identity. Darlene Ferrin was the original target, and they were committing a series of unconnected, unrelated murders to make it look like there's this Zodiac killer, serial killer, but the only victim they actually cared about was Darlene Ferrin, committing additional murders to confuse the authorities. So that was Cat's theory, and you could hear more about that in the episode Zodiac Killer Merchant Marine Theory. There are two of them up there, and much as the Joan Webster episode this weekend, I did like a first cut where I put out the first draft anyway, so it's I have two episodes on the Merchant Marine Theory, but discussing it in different ways, like the first draft and the final draft. The other one is called Zodiac Merchant Marine Theory First Cut, I think it is. and those are all available on this channel. And if you like what you hear, you can like and subscribe. And one more time, these episodes will now be available on LaunchPad for free downloads. Links will be posted in the description box, and you'll be seeing a new t-shirt design that's going around on the screen today. To the YouTube listeners, that is. Anybody can download the show for free, and you can support the show by buying some wonderful t-shirts. Remember, being weird is not a crime. Okay, now, moving on to that second thing I said I wanted to talk about. The biggest motivation for me to do that episode, the Zodiac Killer CIA connection, was because looking at the hoax theory, which is the subject of the book The Myth of the Zodiac Killer by Thomas Henry Horan, I don't know how you could make the hoax theory work if you didn't involve that CIA angle. If all the crimes were just committed in lovers' lanes with a man and a woman in a parked car late at night, I would be like, all right, I follow you completely. Someone is writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit. Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs follow that tradition, or that, those similarities rather than a tradition. But at Lake Berryessa, someone has committed a crime in the daytime, switched from the gun to the knife, wearing the symbol, wearing an elaborate costume. With the Paul Stine murder, the Zodiac killed a man by himself. No woman is present, and then he stole a piece of Paul Stine's shirt as well as Paul Stine's keys and wallet. That is also something that is very, very different. Most serial killers do not deviate from these patterns in such extreme ways, especially if they're only going to be these small amounts of activity that are going on. All the Zodiac confirmed crimes occurred within a 12-month cycle from December 20th to October 11th. So that's also something there. The way that Playtime brought it out is just a way that I thought made sense to me. However, that means I can follow it in a logical sequence. It's not simply about, can you understand what somebody is saying? Yeah, I can comprehend the words that are being shared to me. Did these events actually happen? And was there a group of people that were responsible for the Zodiac Killer murders? Or was there a single person? In this episode, we're going to take off the possibilities of any type of group murder theory or multiple killers theory, and instead I'm going to go on to some things that were sent in to the Instagram page. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. Giving a shout out to Charlie Rowing, who shared something with me. And Charlie says, "Hey Ned, obviously since the 340 was solved, the previous stuff I sent you turned out to be a dud. However, if you didn't already know, I just want to make you aware of this recent podcast with Mike Morford. A couple, and you should couple this with the fact that they were asked to take down a thread on his forum on this suspect by law enforcement, and it sounds like we might finally be reaching the end of the tunnel. Keep the great content coming." Okay, and big thank you to Charlie Rowing. And the podcast that he had shared with me was one that I had never heard of before. And it had Mike Morford on as a guest, and they were going through a suspect together. It's called Murder Was the Case. And you can get it on Anchor FM. That's where it was shared to me. So I listened to this one, and it was about an hour and 20 minutes long, and I tried to absorb the information as well as possible. They don't identify the suspect by name. However, they refer to him as Suspect Mason. But then somebody sent me a DM later on saying, "Hey, did you hear the podcast with Mike Morford of ZodiacKillerSite.com? He has a suspect that goes by the name McDuff." And I'm pretty sure they're talking about the same guy because the context was all the same. So this Mason McDuff, if we want to call him that. I kind of like Suspect Mason, to be honest. That's how I had learned about him. But I do not know his real name. I don't even know if anyone shared that on ZodiacKillerSite.com. And let's look at the big pieces of the profile that Morf has created. The first is, he was 5 feet, 8 inches tall. The second is, at the time of the Lake Herman Road murders, he would have been 23 years old. He had a bachelor's degree in sociology. He was someone who ended up working for the Department of Corrections, starting the job in 1971. He got married in 1974. He was someone who most likely didn't have any dating experience prior to his late 20s. He was someone who was known to do awkward interactions with people, contacting someone after a long period of time. In that podcast, if you ever get a chance to listen to it, and I think that Morf was really zoning in on a particular issue when he was trying to highlight how this guy was getting married. As we said, he got married in 74, and then he contacted his old college roommate, whom he wasn't very close to, but he invited him to the wedding even though they hadn't spoken for 6 years. Sometimes he refers to him as a friend. I mean, Morf, that is. Sometimes Michael Morford refers to this guy as his suspect's friend. At least once, though, he did say that they were roommates, but he invited him to his wedding even though they hadn't spoken for 6 years out of the blue. And Morf was openly asking that as a challenge question, more or less. Is this something weird? I meant to have this discussion later on in the episode, but I don't particularly think there's anything weird about that at all. Contacting your college roommate even though you haven't spoken for 6 years, or contacting a college friend even though you haven't spoken for 6 years and inviting them to your wedding. I mean, bear in mind, this is occurring in the 1960s and 70s. We wouldn't have had the internet. There was no social media. People definitely had slower options of keeping in touch. I don't think there's anything weird about that at all. If anything, it just goes to show that he would be somewhat of a thoughtful and emotional person, and he was obviously putting a lot of thought into other people, the kind of person that would remember names and birthdays and places. And I think that's discussed more in the Zodiac Revisited Volume 3, but I don't remember exactly where I first read that. But that's the book by Michael Cole. You might already have some immediate questions about the info that I just said. 5'8", 23 years old, and sociology major. As far as I know from what Morf shared, he didn't seem to have any other education, like any other formal education. Like he says, he went to a junior college, then got a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Chico State, but he didn't have any type of graduate degree as far as I understand, and he was not in the military, to the best of our knowledge. And in 1971, he got this job with what appears to be the Department of Corrections. At first, Morph is just saying that he's working for the state, and I didn't know what that means. I mean, like, I know it means the state government, but, like, what's he doing? Well, it's actually working with, the Department of Corrections, and he, has some role with that, organization, and that was his career, and he stayed there for 30 years. That'll be very important to something later on. But when I first began trying to differentiate between the group murder theory, as I call it, like, I was thinking that there was a thrill kill club that committed the Zodiac killer murders, and I said I wouldn't talk about that. So instead, to look at a single perpetrator, by the end of 2019, I came to the determination that if there is a single person who committed the canonical Zodiac crimes, then he's probably around 25 years old. Most people think the Zodiac Killer was between 25 and 40 years old, and I was like, it's probably a lot closer to age 25. The reason why I said this was, Eddie Seda, the New York Zodiac copycat, was much younger, and he was in his early 20s. And if you partner this with some of the things we discuss in the psychology episodes, there's a spike in deviant behavior that goes on in males between the ages of 16 to 25. And I mean, the zenith of that is around age 20. When I was age 20, I was in trouble with the law myself. All of that is definitely true. I think all men might have some first-hand awareness of that. So it's also the spike in creativity. Creativity and deviant behavior have a correlation in male behavior. So I really began to think that the Zodiac Killer was around 25 years old. Morph says 23. I do think that's pushing it a little bit, but before I give any type of counter-argument, I would then like to zone in on something else. I had a reversal on that. By the end of 2020, I had abandoned that thought process that, all right, if there's a single Zodiac killer, I was expecting he's probably mid-30s to early 40s. Why would I do that? I guess I was heavily influenced by Gareth Penn, and to a certain extent Drew Beeson's assessment of Don Chaney, but definitely Gareth Penn and talking about the mathematical signatures, as well as the person who designed the Zodiac killer mystery. I mean, like talking about the letters, the ciphers, the bus bomb diagram, all of that stuff, was someone who was coming at this from a very well-educated background, as well as someone who had a lot of life experience. It's not just some kid who's messing around. And I even think that the solution to the 340 cipher was disguised very intricately. I mean, some people were saying after David Oranchak revealed the solution to the 340 that this isn't anything that is that complicated. People just didn't know where to start. No, I think that there's a lot of intelligence in there. And I think there's also a little bit more maturity than someone who's 23 years old. I had a big reversal on the younger 25 or 24, 23-year-old possibility of the Zodiac Killer. But people may have said those same things about Eddie Seda, the early 20s New York Zodiac copycat. And Eddie Seda, I got to do another episode on him because I have one, but it's very, very general. It's one of those old-fashioned gray box recordings. He was someone who got arrested for shooting his sister in the butt. He shot her in the buttocks, and he didn't want to go to jail and simply be known as the guy who shot his sister in the buttocks. And a lot of people think that if he had stayed quiet longer, maybe they never would have found out about the New York Zodiac copycat murders, or that they were one and the same, like that the guy who shot his sister in the butt was also the guy who committed these crimes, but I'm sure everybody would have said that about him. They're like, because he had his own codes and ciphers, and people would have been like, oh, this guy, Eddie Seda, there's no way he could have done that. He's too young, he's not intelligent enough, he's not bright enough. But the suspect, Mason, maybe is also a McDuff in there somewhere, but this suspect that Morf was talking about, age 23, it's possible, I completely admit that. I would be very surprised, and to take a hard stance, I still lean toward that reversal that I had. And if there is a single Zodiac killer suspect out there, I would think that he is around 30s, early 40s, like mid-30s to early 40s, I could say that much. But as for more suspect, bachelor's degree in sociology, no more education. Well, what were we just talking about? And all of those things about mathematical signatures, high understanding of technological awareness. I think Morf is trying to put forward the case that this guy is very smart. He would have learned about a lot of things on his own, but how would he have had the mathematical awareness to compose everything in the Zodiac Killer mystery? Oh, it's possible. Some people can be very good at learning things on their own. Richard Gaikowski, the Zodiac Killer suspect, who has become the center focus of ZodiacKiller.com, was actually very self-taught in computers, and those were some of the things that Tom Voigt shared with me during the episode Zodiac Richard Gaikowski AMA. If anyone wants to hear that on this channel, an invitation. But about Morph's suspect, I think that he's really pushing all the boundaries. 23 years old, not a lot of formal education. I mean, he's a college graduate. I shouldn't say not a lot. He doesn't have any type of graduate degree in mathematics or chemistry or engineering like we would have expected. But also, I think Morph is trying to play the angle that this guy was a gifted underachiever. But the thing that really stood out to me, and this relates to that 1971, 1974 stuff, and I'm sure if you followed the Zodiac Killer mystery, you know exactly what I'm going to say. How do you explain the halt in Zodiac activity from during 72 and 73, more or less, most people believe that if there was a single Zodiac killer, that he was arrested or that he was incarcerated, he was in a mental institution, maybe he was in the military and he was stationed out of the country. But Morph's explanation is quite different. In 1971, this guy got a job with the Department of Corrections, and he stayed there for 30 years. However, in 1974, when the Zodiac Killer resurfaced, he was getting married, and resurfaced only in the letters. But his suspect, Mason, was getting married, and the letters that came back out, including the Exorcist letter, were months before this guy's wedding. So is he not doing any Zodiac activity in 71, 72, and 73 because he doesn't want to jeopardize his job, or that he thinks if he's a state employee working with the Department of Corrections, which is a horribly ironic thing for a serial killer to do, I digress from that. But does he think there's going to be more focus on him? Maybe they have some type of regular background checks. Maybe there's just a lot more scrutiny. Or maybe this guy sorted his life out and he got over his frustrations, because I think I first heard this in an interview with Michael Butterfield, but I think I heard the same stuff in an interview with Morf as well, that the Zodiac Killer was not a sexually motivated serial killer. He's not some guy who's going out and targeting sex workers. And even if there is a sexual component, it's not done because of urges. He's not trying to satiate this urge and constant feeling of committing murder. He's committing the crimes because he is frustrated with his own life, and it's mostly about getting the letters and the ciphers to the police and to the papers so that he can show off that I'm smarter than you. I'm going to commit a crime on December 20th, right before the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year. Put a radiant on top of Mount Diablo, and you're going to see that I'm actually on top of Devil's Mountain. I'm the epitome of darkness. I'm the epitome of evil. I'm even more evil than other people. If I kill people, I'll die and be reborn in paradise, and those whom I have killed will be my slaves. I mean, he's trying to make himself sound more badass than he actually is. So I can follow all of that, but I mean that's not relevant to a single suspect. That could be any heterosexual male. But they do believe that these are some other things that were shared. This guy is a Caucasian, of course. He is someone of North European ancestry, not like any of the Mediterranean countries. Some type of North European ancestry or British Isles ancestry. And he would mostly not have had any type of dating experiences up until his late 20s. And bear in mind, if Morph's theory is correct, or that his suspect is correct, rather, then he would be operating in the early part of his 20s, like he's age 23 at the time of the first confirmed crime. So that leads me to believe that this guy's sexually frustrated. He's targeting heterosexual couples because he's angry that he cannot have those experiences, whether it's David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, or Darlene Ferrin and Mike Michaud, or Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. He wants to go after a man and a woman together. I mean, how does the Stein murder fit into that? Perhaps those theories that people have are correct, in that Mike Michaud survived the Blue Rock Springs shooting. Brian Hartnell survived the Lake Berryessa stabbing. So the Zodiac Killer wanted to prove to somebody, or to prove to the world, that he could kill a man. So that's why he targeted Paul Stein. But the first victims, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, that also shows that there is a man present. But I think that the Zodiac may have also wanted to prove that he is not singly targeting women, but many people do believe that the motivation for the Zodiac Killer crimes is quite simple, that this guy wanted to get the men out of the way so that he would have access to the women. And I think if he is a heterosexual male, that's just looking at different sides of the coin. Yes, he's going to be thinking about the women more, but he is also going to have animosity toward the men because he feels that he has been denied the types of experiences that they are meant to have. I can follow all of that, and that's another reason why in the past I thought that if there is a single Zodiac killer suspect out there, then he is probably going to be in the early 20s. I still have to say to the contrary. I think Morf's suspect is a little bit too young, and we haven't even talked about the height. 5'8". I think that someone who is 5 feet 8 inches tall is the lowest possible amount. That's like the lowest height anyone could have, the shortest height rather. 5 feet 8 inches tall. How do you explain the Lake Berryessa stabbing, where Cecilia Shepard said the guy was 6 feet tall, or that he's an inch or two taller than someone who is 5'10 or 5'11? Brian Hartnell was a poor judge of height because of his own height. How would you explain that? And the explanation is that, firstly, he's wearing boots on uneven ground, and he may have been standing several feet away from them. They're hinging down, and so on. He seemed a lot taller, but I'm 5'8". I've never once been mistaken for being 6 feet tall. And this guy would have also had the Lake Berryessa hood on, which should have distorted his height a little bit. But that's pushing it. I mean, someone who's 5'8" has no education in mathematics. I mean, someone who doesn't seem to have had any degree in the math or science fields, or even engineering, or anything related to technology that we can understand. It's pushing it, like all of the boundaries are. Everything is just so borderline. But maybe this is how the guy evaded capture. But here's something else, though. Morf learned about this guy because he went to the Blue Rock Springs phone. Oh, I mean, the phone that was used after the Blue Rock Springs murder. They didn't use the phone at the park, being very clear about that. And he looked at all of the houses in the surrounding area and tried to narrow down a suspect who would have fit the bill in that way. And if there's anything else people want to contribute, please put that in the comment section below. So I think that's a very interesting way of approaching it. But part of me believes the guy's too short. He's too small. He doesn't have the brain for this. The hormones and the sexuality angle, I follow completely. Yes, that ticks all the boxes. And the 1971 to 74 time frame, I think that also, it's perfect explanation. I even did an episode once when somebody asked me to respond to the question, do you believe that the Exorcist letter is a suicide note? And I've been thinking about that one a lot. The part where it says, plunged into the suicide's grave, Titwillow, Titwillow, Titwillow. Does that mean that the Zodiac Killer was trying to kill himself? And I said, no. I do not believe that the Zodiac Killer would have used that as a suicide note. If anything, it just shows that this guy's pulling things out of different pieces of literature. First by saying, I saw The Exorcist, and I think that it's the best satirical comedy ever. And then the second part is saying that he plunging into the suicide's grave, the billowy wave, the suicide grave, Titwillow, Titwillow, Titwillow. That's a reference from the Mikado. P.S. If I don't see this note in your paper, I'll do something nasty. And what was he going to do that's nasty? Richard Grinnell thinks that Kevin Brooks has perhaps had the best answer to that, and the artwork or the symbols on the Exorcist letter simply mean to kill, but Robert Graysmith thought that it could be arranged to show Lee, as in Arthur Lee Allen. So, in answer to that, some people think that it's not actual suicide. It is instead putting an end to the Zodiac Killer persona, and that every letter after 1974 is fake, and that this guy simply stopped killing because his sexual frustration was gone. He also had the job with the Department of Corrections, so he wasn't going to jeopardize his future. He achieved a certain sense of stability, and all of this deviant behavior and sexual frustration in his early 20s is just sublime. It's just not there anymore, so he doesn't need to keep committing these crimes. But what do you have to say about this suspect Mason? And if he has been referred to as McDuff in some other areas, you can share that down. Just one person sent in a DM asking me if I would respond to the suspect named McDuff that Morf was talking about, and I had heard about him as Suspect Mason, and I have left out one detail. He gets that name not because it's his real name, it's because his family had connections to the Freemasons. But I would love to see any of your responses in the comment section below. Please share anything that you want. Be right back after this.
You're listening to Blackbox Online Radio.
This show is brought to you by TeeSpring. Feel free to check out the merchandise. Almost all sizes and colors are listed.
Blackbox Online Radio.
And remember YouTube Premium. You can download the show, take it on the go, anywhere and anyhow.
Please like and subscribe. Grazie mille.
Okay, hello everybody, and we are back. I would like to be very clear about one thing from the previous segment. Do I think that Michael Morford has found the right guy in the Zodiac Killer mystery? No, I don't. But if I'm wrong, I will be the first to admit it. It doesn't make any difference about what my opinion is or how closely I think Morph's profile matches the observations that I've made about the Zodiac Killer. I mean, if I'm wrong and Morph has the right guy, more power to him, and I will gladly congratulate him if he has indeed solved the Zodiac Killer mystery. But a 23-year-old who is 5 feet 8 inches tall without a propensity for mathematics, I think those are strong things to consider. Moving on to our next question, we have one that comes to us from Classic Chevy Cat about the murder of Joan Webster. And she says, okay, this is clear. My question still goes. Back to Logan Airport. Is there any proof that Leonard Paradiso was running an illegal taxi service? To provide a little bit of context, Joan Webster disappeared on the 28th of November, 1981, after leaving Boston Logan Airport. Somebody approached her when she was waiting in a taxi line, and they got her to change and go with him. This man was seen wearing eyeglasses, very disheveled hair, a long, rough beard, and he is still unidentified to this day. The authorities believe that Leonard Paradiso, Boston's unknown serial killer, was the person who approached Joan, and then at first they were playing the angle that he drove Joan Webster to a boat, which Paradiso owned, pulled out a gun, a .357 Magnum actually, and then told Joan to get onto the boat. He held her up at gunpoint, and she didn't voluntarily go up. She was under the threat of death. And then he sexually assaulted her on the boat and dumped her body into Boston Harbor. That all changed in 1990 when Joan's remains were uncovered in Hamilton, Massachusetts. She had been buried in the ground, and she actually died from blunt force trauma. They still insisted that Leonard Paradiso murdered Joan Webster, and the authorities, I mean, we're talking law enforcement and the former assistant district attorney, maintained that position to this day. So the first question is there any proof that this guy, Leonard Paradiso, was running an illegal taxi service? I asked Eve Carson about this, who is the sister-in-law of Joan Webster and the author of the book Mommy's a Mole, Whale of a Tale, about the Webster murder, and she said no, Leonard Paradiso was not known to operate any type of black taxi or gypsy taxi or using this method to do anything in the past. Leonard Paradiso's primary occupation was he sold clams and shellfish. He was a shellfish monger, if you will. Back to the comment. As soon as Gareth Penn is mentioned, it becomes odd to me. Did Gareth Penn think that the man who convinced Joan to go to his taxi was O'Hare? Now, I asked Eve Carson this one as well, and she said yes. It was actually through the research of Eve Carson they learned that there could be two people in the taxi cab. We're talking about the illegal taxi now. This bearded man approaches Joan Webster when she's waiting in the taxi line, and then he directs her to a car where there's already somebody in it. When Gareth Penn wrote the book Times 17, he was not aware of that. That was uncovered through Eve Carson's research, and she shared that with me through our discussions. So yes, Gareth Penn would have said that that was O'Hare that would have abducted Joan Webster. And this goes into another thing in Time 17 where Gareth Penn proposed that the Zodiac Killer might now be driving the taxi cab. The Zodiac murdered Paul Stein in a taxi as a passenger. Now the Zodiac is driving the taxi and then murders Joan Webster. But this is back to the comment. I'm beginning to think that Leonard Paradiso didn't kill anyone. Definitely not Joan. I have doubts about Maria Iannuzzi being killed by Paradiso. Eve Carson's theory is becoming clearer and supposedly holds water. The supposed jailhouse confession from Paradiso is very thin in my opinion. Not buying it. My thought is that the Zodiac killer has nothing to do with Joan Webster's death. Ned, this series is good. I have to listen more than once. Thank you. Hey, classic Chevy Cat. Thank you so much for that. And as far as Maria Iannuzzi goes, Maria Iannuzzi was murdered on August 12th of 1979. She was attending a wedding on August 11th, where she was introduced to Leonard Paradiso, Boston's quote-unquote unknown serial killer, and their theory, by they I mean the authorities, believe that Leonard Paradiso would have picked up Maria Iannuzzi from the Cardinales Nest Bar in Revere, Massachusetts, at around 1:45 a.m., and then he would have driven her someplace, once again, sexually assaulted her, and then murdered her. In fact, they might even say that he strangled her to the point of unconsciousness, raped her, and then tied her scarf in a double knot around her neck and strangled her to death. The problem with this is, as Gareth Penn, even to his credit, wisely pointed out in the book Times 17, Maria Iannuzzi was wearing a black leotard when her body was found, and for somebody to sexually assault her, they would have to have taken off the leotard, and you mean it wasn't cut, it wasn't ripped, so they would have had to have taken it off and then put it back on her. It makes absolutely no sense at all. So, now here is our next question. I'm going to give a condensed version, but it comes to us from Anna Morris, who says something about the Zodiac killer, and she says that the summary of her very extended comment is, was there one killer and one letter writer? But it says, I know there are arguments against these ideas. The Zodiac apparently called the police to report recent crimes. He wrote on Brian Hartnell's car door. He mailed clippings of Paul Stein's shirt. Even so, might there have been a killer and a writer? Might the writer have continued his career longer than the killer? Oh yes, absolutely. Very widely discussed theory. She begins by saying that there are arguments against that. Yeah, there are, but I've definitely thought about that. I mean, most of us think about Arthur Lee Allen in this context, the prime suspect. He was exonerated because of everything connected to the letters, like DNA, the fingerprints, or the side palm print, also called writer's palm. He was exonerated because of that, but those are on the letters, not at the crime scene. So then you begin to think, well, did he not just have a partner? And one point that Tom Voigt did want to share with me about any sort of multiple killers theory is that at every crime scene, it can be explained by one person. Though if you go over to Richard Grinnell's channel, you will find a video called the 9-to-1 ratio. I believe it's talking about how there could have been two shooters at Lake Herman Road, and it's very convincing. Richard Grinnell's YouTube channel, right here, you can watch that one. But what Tom Voigt was trying to instill in me is that one person could have committed all these crimes. For example, you have one set of footprints at Lake Berryessa going to and from the kill site, or the scene where the attacker, Cecilia Shepard, passed away later on in the hospital, and then the killer goes back to the car and writes the message. Only one set of footprints. There's only one person that is present during these murders, and that includes the murder of Paul Stein, very obviously. Now, did somebody provide someone else with a piece of Paul Stein's shirt, and was there a different letter writer? Numerous people have talked about that, and I even brought up that video from Aphrodite once when he said that he thought there was a woman who was composing the ciphers and coming up with the ideas for the letters, and he said that it was a woman, but what he said was a female presence, and I think that he was alluding to the fact that the Zodiac killer may have been a gay man. He didn't say that in his exact words, but I think that's what he was talking about, like a gay man who's battling with his masculine side and feminine side, and you could even interpret that in other ways, a straight man who is trying not to come across as feminine or metrosexual. So those things have been widely discussed, and I don't think it's out of left field or anything, and it's not too far out. Our next comment comes to us from Jacob Wilbers, who has something to say about the episode Who Was Mr. Cruel? Australia's Darkest Mystery. Mr. Cruel was a serial rapist, and he also ended up murdering at least one victim. But even though Mr. Cruel has only 4 canonical attacks, many people often think that one of them, the murder of Carmen Chan, was not actually Mr. Cruel, because in the other incidents, the what is known as the Lord Plenty attack, where the victim's name was withheld from the press, and the other two, it is believed that well, I mean, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. He did not murder the victims. Those were abductions and rapes, and the victims were later released. With Carmen Chan, she was murdered, shot 3 times in the back of the head. Her body was found 12 months after her disappearance in a landfill, and this is all happening in the area around Melbourne, Australia. Jacob Wilbers has a comment. After seeing this, I'm thinking he was more focused on hiding his eyes. Maybe he had heterochromia, 2 eye colors, or strange eye colors. On the flight path, all they are saying is that his lair was in a house in the flight path. I know I live directly in the flight path of an airport, not that it was at a base or something. Did anyone else find it strange that none of the witnesses mentioned the eye color? I bet the cops are holding that back because they want to identify the guy because he has something weird. That's a very good point, about the eye color. And did the police not reveal that? Or the first time, though, that Mr. Cruel is going out, he is wearing a visor over his eyes. He has a one-slit ski mask, or a one-hole ski mask, rather, where the nose is covered and there's just the large hole around the eyes. And he made some type of visor around it. I don't, I can't tell you why, but I was quite surprised when I saw that for the first time. But no, I mean, Jacob might have something there. Like, this guy seems to be going to a very large amount of trouble to hide the area around his eyes, because in the most famous ski mask that Mr. Cruel has worn, he covered all of the visible skin around his lips, and only the teeth are showing, and then only the smallest amount of eyesight can get through that ski mask that he is wearing when he's wearing the 3-hole ski mask. But in every attack, Mr. Cruel is wearing a different ski mask. And when he abducted Carmen Chan, she didn't live to tell her tale. She was murdered, of course, but her sisters did see Mr. Cruel, and one of them even made a composite drawing. I mean, it's the drawing of a child, and that has a different mask altogether, with some type of extended area coming out. So he wore different masks every time. Did he have 2 different eye colors, or did he have some reason that would make his eyes a little bit more bloodshot? I mean, is there? He's obviously trying to hide something about not only his identity, but some very significant characteristics. And this could be something that will be rather valuable. Some people do believe that Carmen Chan was murdered because she pulled off the ski mask, or that she was in this lair that Jacob was talking about, the place where the assaults would have taken place, like abducted from the home, and then they're taken to Mr. Cruel's lair, which is really just an apartment or a bedroom, somewhere that is under the flight path of airplanes. They just hear airplanes going by. Where is it? We still do not know. They've investigated 30,000 homes in Australia. Still, they aren't sure where it was. And then Carmen Chan may have recognized something in the room. Hey, that's the thing that belongs to this person. She may have said something that set Mr. Cruel off in a different, more heinous direction. However, we aren't sure because she did not survive. Rest in peace to Carmen Chan. Moving on to our next comment, we have one from Southern Mom, who has one on the death of Jonathan Cruz, new developments. Back in 2018 and 19, I did a couple of episodes on the death of Jonathan Cruz. He was someone who died in Texas under suspicious circumstances, and one person who was allegedly present in the room is named Brenda Lazaro, his then girlfriend. Now, I recorded an episode on the death of Jonathan Cruz 3 times. The first 2 times, I couldn't upload it. I deleted the recording because I had some very controversial things to say about it. Brenda Lazaro, his then girlfriend, has been somewhat vilified in the court of public opinion, and I actually thought that she was innocent. I thought the death of Jonathan Cruz was, it was an accidental death, that he had picked up a gun that was present in his home. He was just a legal, firearm owner, and he owned a handgun, and that he made some comment to the effect of, "Hey, you want to see how much I love you? I can't live without you." And he fired the gun against his left side, like right near his rib cage, and that single gunshot ended up killing him. The reason why I believe this was there was a magazine clip that was found outside of the gun. The magazine clip wasn't even in it, and I thought perhaps Jonathan had removed it, and he believed that the gun wasn't loaded, and it was empty, but there was still one bullet in the chamber, and that ended up ending his life. The other reason I thought this was because they were watching TV. There were boxes of Chinese food that were on the side of the bed, his left side as well. And when they did the reconstructions, you can see that Jonathan Cruz's left arm is actually on the lying on top of the boxes of Chinese food. And I really thought that this was just an accidental death. But then, firstly, Southern Mom says there was no gun residue left on his hand, and it was all over her referring to Brenda Lazaro. HH suggests, HH left a comment that says, "I suggest you do more reading and research about the case. There's plenty of evidence out there that disproves your theory. It was not accidental and it was not suicide. The facts show that it was murder." And my simple response to both of them would be that I actually wrote this out to HH a couple months ago. "Hi, thanks for listening. This was an older episode, and yes, I had a reversal. As you said, once I was faced with more evidence, I had to admit I was wrong. Big credit to Sheila Wysocki for all her work." And Sheila Wysocki is the private investigator who hosted the show Without Warning. I followed her material on the death of Lauren Agee, which is the subject of the podcast Without Warning, as well as lots of interviews that she did about the death of Jonathan Cruz, and I had to have a reversal. I began thinking that Brenda Lazaro was innocent, and this was just a boyfriend and girlfriend getting in a heated argument, and some guy had a lapse in judgment. I mean, all of Jonathan Cruz's friends and family said very clearly they thought he wouldn't have done something like that, even holding an empty gun against his rib cage and saying, "Hey, you want to see how much I love you?" and then pull the trigger. They just said that wasn't in his character, but that's not exactly harder evidence. What I think is much harder in terms of evidence is what Sheila Wysocki was trying to find out about how is it physically possible that the gun could have entered, or the bullet could have entered his angle from a gun that was held in his left hand, and they're just trying to find out, like, mathematically speaking, geometrically speaking, would this angle have been possible? That's the stuff that is much more pressing and much more valuable. As far as Brenda Lazaro being innocent, in the first video I ever saw on the death of Jonathan Cruz, there was one piece of info in there that I turned a blind eye to, and I first heard about it on the Lorden Arts channel. Big thank you to John Lorden and all of his coverage. And it was that there were witnesses who claimed they heard the sound of the gunshot 20 minutes before Brenda Lazaro made the 911 call. Now, of course, they wouldn't have put all that together. This is stuff the authorities would have put together. They say they heard the gunshot, just making up the numbers, at 7 o'clock, and she made the 911 call at 7:20, something like that. So they're looking at the timeline, and that alone should tell you that something is fishy about her story. But big thank you to HH and Southern Mom for leaving those comments on the death of Jonathan Cruz. Being clear as well, I do now believe that he was murdered, but you can always be persuaded by new evidence. When you learn something new, it can change the way that you think about something. Moving on to an older black box recording as well. This one is on the death of Henry McCabe, the man who disappeared in Minnesota and then was found dead in a lake after being at a nightclub with his friends. Henry McCabe was originally from Liberia. He was experiencing some financial trouble, and he went out drinking with his friends. This is the famous story of the friends who took his wallet to cut him off so he couldn't buy more alcohol, and then he was walking home, and some way, somehow, he ended up in the water. But before that, there was a voicemail that was recorded of Henry McCabe just making these awful, awful noises. And I've said before, but there were two true crime cases that I really wanted to explore to the point of writing a book about them. One was the disappearance of Maura Murray. I was about to say the death of Maura Murray, but no, she has never been she's never been found. Okay, the disappearance of Maura Murray. That's one, and the other one was the death of Henry McCabe. And I thought of the title "Calling from a Nightmare: What Happened to Henry McCabe." But this is on the episode "Who Killed Henry McCabe?" and it's from Andre Jones, who recently wrote in saying, one theory is that his friends dropped him off at a gas station, so it could be recorded on camera that Henry was dropped off where he said he dropped him off for an alibi. Then they merely drove up the street out of camera view and waited for Henry to leave the gas station, walking away from the gas station, back to Henry, and said, you know what, get in the car, I'll take you to your house. He got in, and then they took him to the woods by the lake, and what happened at the lake was anybody's guess. Well, it sounds like what Andre Jones is saying in this theory is that Henry McCabe was murdered, or that, it sounds like pretty clear they murdered him. And there is another piece of info. When they drove him back from the nightclub, they dropped him off in the wrong area, completely away from his house, and the timeline in that one is very bizarre, but John Lorden as well has heard the entire voicemail that wasn't made available to the general public, and I think Brian Butterworth, who has a comment on this episode as well. At first he said that it was in John Lorden's episode, and I went back and I listened to the whole thing, and I was like, I didn't hear the entirety of the voicemail, and he actually said it was in one of the updates where he said that he was able to listen to it, although he wasn't able to share it with the media, or share it on his show, and the media had chosen to hold it back. And just the conclusion is that Henry McCabe was actually dealing with a lot more of, he was dealing with some mental health issues, and he was disoriented, intoxicated by a water source. And some people think, getting away from the murder angle, that he was intoxicated by a water source he fell in, and the odd sounds that he is making in the, on the voicemail are actually just, shivering in the water or frustration in the water, but somebody allegedly says stop it in the voicemail, although that wasn't released to the news coverage. Yesterday we had one comment come in on the episode Jason Derek Brown. Where is he? Jason Derek Brown was someone who has been on the FBI top 10 most wanted list since as long as I can remember. He was somebody who committed a case of armed robbery, and he disappeared, and has never been seen since. Armed robbery and murder, actually. He murdered it's really been a long time since I've went through this episode, so I'll give just the most basic Wikipedia-style introduction. Jason Derek Brown was born on July 1st, 1969. He's an American fugitive wanted for first-degree murder and armed robbery in Phoenix, Arizona. On November 29, 2004, Jason Brown allegedly shot and killed an armored car guard outside of a movie theater and then fled with the money. On December 8, 2007, he was named by the FBI as the 489th fugitive to be placed on the top 10 most wanted list. And that is info that you can also find on the FBI wanted poster. So what happened with that one is he may have almost certainly stashed a bicycle nearby this crime scene where he was murdering the armored car driver and stole the money, gets on a bike and is able to disappear. And before you think that's silly, one of the times the Golden State Killer got away is also by escaping on bicycle. Bicycles are quiet, they don't make noise, and they don't draw a lot of attention to themselves. Michael Freach, though, has left a comment on the only episode I have about Jason Derek Brown, which I believe came out in 2018, and he says, Jason Brown will never get caught. Never. He outsmarted the Phoenix Police and the Federal Bureau of Incompetence, the FBI. He will avoid petty arrests and he will stay off the radar, I guarantee it. Go, Jason. Kiss. Yeah, there's a little kissy emoji. Go. And then there's some happy faces. You is the man. Well, I would hardly think that he is the man. He murdered somebody else in cold blood for profit. But as I understand, the last confirmed sighting of Jason Derek Brown was in Salt Lake City, Utah, and he was a member of the Mormon Church. And when he went on his Mormon mission, he learned how to speak French fluently. And in that episode back in 2018, I was even putting up the proposition, would he try to enter into Canada and pass himself off as a Quebecois? That was just guesswork on my part. I think the more important thing is this sighting that happened in Salt Lake City, which was, I'm a little bit hazy on that date as well, so I will just read off that segment. The most recent disclosed credible sighting came in 2008 near the Hogle Zoo in Salt Lake City. An acquaintance of Brown, someone who had gone to missionary training with him and accompanied him on his mission to France, recognized him when they were both stopped at a traffic light. Upon their mutual recognition, Brown promptly accelerated through the stoplight and sped away. The witness shared this sighting with the authorities. I think that that's much more credible, and it seems like he was trying to just blend in with the Mormon community of either Salt Lake City or somewhere in the state of Utah. But this is something new that has been posted online, that they thought that if he did flee the country, that he would be living in France or Quebec or Thailand. That is exactly what I was thinking, minus the Thailand angle, but it's based on his connections to France in the past. I thought that that would be something that he would try and pull off. No, I don't believe that he will ever be captured. The reasons why, though, that they think that Jason Brown will not be captured is because the original wanted poster that they put out for him may have had a depiction of him that didn't resemble his appearance at the time. He had much longer hair and a very like a darker, more tanned complexion than what was seen in the on the FBI Most Wanted poster. So that's one, as well as constantly moving around, leaving the leaving false clues, being on the run. And this is one that I think that he will just not get arrested for these petty crimes, much as the comment says. I do agree with that there. I do not agree that he was a good person. I mean, he murdered somebody just so that he could do a kind of one-man heist. He's a dirtbag, more or less. But yeah, like, the famous thing, though, about his getaway is something that I did just have to recently refresh myself on. I was like, he was the guy that drove to the border of Mexico, and then he used his credit card at a gas station near in southern Orange County near San Diego, like in a place near the Mexican border, and then he drove all the way back up to Portland, Oregon, and then went off the grid. So he was trying to make the authorities think that he was entering Mexico, but he did not. He stayed in the United States of America, and I believe he just dumped the car more or less and then disappeared. And I think what I said in that episode, although it's from a few years ago, was before you think that's a ridiculous escape plan, it worked. He has never been found again. But I do hope one day that Jason Brown will be apprehended and arrested, and he will go on trial for these crimes. I think it's very unlikely. He has been on the FBI's top 10 most wanted ever since I've been looking into the subject. So that's all I have to share. Thank you to everybody who's listened to this AMA. One more time, you can get free downloads of the show at LaunchPad DM. Link is in the description box. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com, or you can contact me on the DMs at Instagram, BlackBoxNed88. There's also a Facebook page for the show, if I can get my words right, and that is available in the description box here, my personal Facebook, as well as Black Box Online Radio on Facebook. So there are many ways to get in touch and stay in contact, and the best way is, of course, putting your ideas in the comments section below. And feel free to visit the Teespring page. This channel relies on your support, and of course you can buy t-shirts, but the absolute best way is just to listen to some more content. And please feel free to visit some of the other playlists on this channel. And I will see you guys on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.